In this video, I will demonstrate how I produce invention figures which meet all the requirements for filing with the USPTO. I use a Microsoft Word file document which is 8.5 by 11 inches or letter size. Each drawing page has a 1-inch margin along each of its 4 edges. Each drawing page may contain as many figures as reasonably possible. Each drawing page may be used in the portrait orientation or landscape orientation. All invention drawings on a drawing page must be in the same portrait orientation or landscape orientation. All invention drawings, including figures, numbers, and text, must be in black ink. The red ink used throughout this video is only for demonstration purposes. Each drawing page has a page number and a total pages number. The total pages number indicates the total drawing pages an invention has. Drawing lines are used to illustrate an invention. Lead lines are used to assign reference numbers. Each lead line must touch its component and must be thinner than the drawing line of its component. All numbers must be sequential, for example 1, 2, 3, etc. Page numbers start from 1, for example 1/20, 2/20, etc. Figure numbers must start from 1, for example figure 1, figure 2, etc. Figure numbers and reference numbers must not be the same to prevent numerical confusion. Therefore, because the figure number must start from figure number 1, figure number 2, and so on, the reference numbers must start from a higher unused number set, for example 51, 52, and so on. The font size of the page number and the total pages number must be 22 point in boldface. The font size of the figure number must be 22 point in boldface. The font size of the reference number must be 14 point in boldface. All invention drawings, including figures, numbers, and text, must be in black ink and may be hand-drawn or software drawn. I use dot-dash lines to illustrate how components are assembled together. I use a dot-dash line to connect jagged lines when breaking an overly long component, allowing it to fit on a drawing page. I use jagged lines to break an overly long component, allowing it to fit on a drawing page. Regardless of how thin a component is, its thickness must be illustrated. The drawing lines illustrating its thickness must not touch each other. For example, a phone screen protector's thickness is illustrated as thickness, reference number 54. I use a double-headed curved arrow to illustrate that a component can rotate or pivot in 2 opposite directions. I use a single-headed curved arrow to illustrate that a component can rotate or pivot in a given direction. For example, component reference number 55 can rotate or pivot in the direction of arrow reference number 58. I use a double-headed straight arrow to illustrate that a component can slide in 2 opposite directions. I use a single-headed straight arrow to illustrate that a component can slide in a given direction. For example, component reference number 55 can slide in the direction of arrow reference number 59. I use the same figure number with sequential suffixes such as figure 10a, figure 10b, etc., and at least one arrow to illustrate the multiple positions of a movable component. I use the same figure number with sequential suffixes such as figure 11a, figure 11b, etc., and at least one arrow to illustrate the multiple positions of a movable component. I use dashed lines to illustrate hidden lines of a component. For example, recess, reference number 62, of a lid. I use dashed lines to illustrate the hidden lines of a component. For example, tube, reference number 63. I use dashed lines and dashed lead lines to illustrate a hidden component. For example, cork, reference number 64. I use hatch lines to illustrate a slicing or cross-section. For example, cross-section, reference number 65. I use 2 different hatch line styles to illustrate 2 different components. For example, tube, reference number 66, and cork, reference number 67. I use the same hatch line style on 2 different areas to illustrate that they belong to the same component. For example, ring, reference number 68. I use double dot dash drawing lines and double dot dash lead lines to illustrate a component not part of an invention. For example, figure 18 illustrates how tire, reference number 69, not part of the invention, is connected to wheel, reference number 70, which is part of the invention. I use double dot dash lines to spread a long object on multiple pages. I use the same figure number with sequential suffixes, for example, figure 19A and figure 19B. After finishing drawing all of the figures, I need to convert the Microsoft Word file to a PDF file.